Welcome back, Praetors. My name is Doug with 2 Plus Stuff. Today, we are going to be talking all about Prime advantages because in one video recently, I asked for questions for topic information and Magimon left this comment here. I'd like to see a video talking about Prime advantages, both the universal ones and the Legion/Alliance ones. And that's what this video is going to be all about, talking about the basic Prime advantages that we get in the core rules that everyone has access to. And then I'm going to rapid fire through the Legion ones because there's a lot of them. And just kind of giving my hot takes, interactions that seem interesting or ways that they might be useful. What I do with all these videos is if you know, you're going to know your Legion better than me. So if there is a synergy or something about that particular Prime advantage that I missed, please leave it in the comments down below because I always pin the most helpful comments so new players coming into the game can find stuff. So what are Prime advantages? Well, they were introduced in this particular edition of the game, and they have to do with list building. To build a list in Horus Heresy 3rd edition, you pick a detachment, and some of those detachments have these little star rings around a particular unit slot. That means that this unit, whenever you fill that slot, can choose a Prime advantage. These are ways of separating heroic units from the chumps, a way of integrating a little bit of character into some of the different army detachments and stuff like that. They can be really interesting. Now there are, again, core Prime advantages that any unit, regardless of their Legion, can take. And then we'll jump into the Legion-specific ones. The first one to cover is Master Sergeant. This one is very simple. If the unit who filled that Prime slot has a Sergeant, then they get +1 to their weapon skill, attack, and leadership, and gain the champion subtype. Now what this really means is you take a normal unit and you elevate one of their characters into being able to do challenges, and that is huge in this edition. And I want to take this opportunity to knock out another question I was sent, and this one by Mr. Big Apple, and essentially asking, when you do this advantage, does the Sergeant get access to any more types of gear? Or is he stuck with the Sergeant list? And the answer is yes and no. Having this Prime advantage does not explicitly let a Sergeant take any new types of war gear. You're still limited to what the actual data card says that the Sergeant can take. Usually it's the Sergeant's weapon list. The asterisk there, though, is that many Legions have Legion-specific weapons that are available to the champion subtype. So because he gains that keyword, he would gain access to these things. It's not consistent amongst every Legion because they don't all have stuff that fills, weapon options that way, but it's something worth looking at. An example is the Thousand Sons have a weapon in their armory called the Archaea Pattern Force Sword. Any model with the Thousand Sons or champion types can exchange a power sword for this weapon, and so that's how you could do it on your Sergeant. Give them a power sword. Now that they're a champion, they can exchange that for this special one. But regardless of the weapon options that you choose, it elevates a Sergeant to a minor hero. Very minor, but minor hero. There's lots of units in the game that would love to have +1 weapon skill, +1 attack, just in terms of the number of attacks that unit as a whole can dish out. Nobody suffers from having +1 to all the best stats in the game. And the thing about heroes, not heroes, but champions in this case, is when you can issue a challenge to your opponent, if they don't have someone who can issue a challenge, they will take a penalty. So you've just changed the dynamic by having, what could be something as simple as a base infantry that can pose a threat, at least in terms of leadership debuffs and that kind of stuff, to bigger units. And I like this one because there is not a single unit in the game that is not better or safer for taking this. Like, having a hero simply means that you can not take the penalty if someone challenges you. You can challenge others and give them the penalty. Everybody likes to have a Sergeant with +1 to their leadership for battle shock, or not battle shock, but the mental state checks within the new edition. There's just a lot of utility here. Now there is a limit where you can only take one of these per detachment. So that's important, but it's also not hard to find several places in a list where you could probably use this. Multiple detachments. I really like the narrative of a veteran from a different Legion coming in and taking command. Like, we have a job to do. I'm going to take command and lead these guys. Thematically, that's kind of what I think of these as, like vaulted characters, highly independent, but they're with this squad for a reason. Next up is my personal favorite, combat veterans. All models in the unit gain +1 to their leadership, their cool, their intelligence and willpower to a maximum of 10. Unlike the first one, there is no detachment limit. Every single unit you take could take this. And this one's important specifically to me. What stands out is units that cannot take a Vox. Okay, the Nuncio Vox allows you to have more opportunities to kind of shake status effects and stuff like that. If a unit doesn't have access to that, you really want those mental stats as high as you can get them, which is why things like the Chaplain also makes a great choice for adding on heroes and stuff like that. This is the same vein. Now, it works even better if you have a Vox, of course, because then you're testing more times on a better score. But if you don't, this is one of the levers you can pull to increase the mental stats of your units. There are not a ton of bonuses in this game to cool as a stat, which is used frequently when it comes to status effects. I mean, again, the Chaplain exists as a character because he has cool 10. So buffing that up on any unit makes them really good. I also really like this on units that I just want to forget about, like a unit of tactical squads that has no goal other than sitting in the back on an objective. I'll put this on them because I don't expect anything out of them, and if any stray shots or deep strikers tries to put a status effect on them, they're just more resistant to it. It's a nice fix it and forget it kind of a buff for your unit. And this is one that I often recommend to people. If you are kind of stuck in analysis paralysis, not sure of what upgrades or prime advantages to put on which units, this is just a really good baseline. Again, there's no one who doesn't benefit from it. The next one is also a favorite, very simple. It's called Paragon of Battle. You're going to pick a unit from this slot. A model from this unit slot. It has to have the command subtype. It gains +1 attack, weapon skill, and ballistic skill. So it could be, like, for example, a command group or something like that, but you're still only picking one model from it. But most of the time, it's single heroes. Consider that in Horus Heresy, a high weapon skill makes you hit harder and also be harder to hit. It acts as a defensive stat in melee as well. So you can easily crank, say a Centurion, which is the middle road hero, up to a Traitor level by just acing up all of his stats. In fact, one of my favorite units to do this with is the Vigilator, because +1 ballistic skill on a sniper is never bad. This tends to be my default choice when it comes to command prime advantages, just because for me personally, there's not a lot of my Legion specific ones that stand out to me, and I just like the consistency of +1 to a stat flat. Next is Special Assignment, and this one I had to reread a few times when I was first cracking open the rulebook. Essentially, you can take a command slot and replace it with a high command slot. The difference is that high command slot doesn't get to bring in an Apex detachment or anything like that. It is simply you want a model that happens to be in the high command section, so you bring it over, but it doesn't act like a high Traitor dude in charge. Now this one, it may have a lot more interesting play once we get the campaign books. Every single time they release these campaign books, there's more hero options, there's more high command and command choices available, that kind of stuff. Right now, I simply don't see a meaningful use of this rule. If you know one, please, I'm asking you, leave it down in the comments below, because aside from thematically having like, a storytelling thing where you want to have a leader and then someone who's trying to usurp their power or authority and have two, leaders, but one's technically in charge, and that's the story you're trying to tell, makes perfect sense. As far as everyday gaming and why it would be in the core set, I'm at a loss. So again, if you know, let me know. What I can say though is, from having looked at many Horus Heresy lists, you could easily pass over this one, never think about it, and lose nothing. So if you're a new player, ignore it. And lastly, for the core ones, is Logistical Benefit, often called the best and worst of all the different prime advantages. And essentially what it is this. You take the unit that has this prime advantage option, give it to them, and then in that same detachment, you can add any kind of unit slot, barring high command and command, and add it in there. So you could have your primary force org, say you want a land raider, it doesn't fit anywhere else. You make your first troop squad, Logistical Benefit, and then put in a heavy transport slot, put a land raider in there. And that seems great at first when I was reading it, because it means that list building is essentially a free and fluid thing, right? There are some lists that can't be run because there's just not the right combination of detachments, but most things that I have found are able to be done simply because this rule exists in the game. In fact, a lot of the lists I was building early on, before I kind of began to flesh out my collection, I had to use this a lot to get my second edition list to work in third, but there's a big reason why you don't want to just leave it there. I've seen several comments saying like, oh yeah, this is great because I have to use logistical benefit because I have to do this to get my list to work. And that simply isn't true, because the opportunity cost that you're giving up to take that unit is one that could directly benefit another unit. All the things we mentioned so far, and the Legion specific ones we're about to, you're missing out on those to take this, which is kind of the bummer. Sometimes it's necessary. I myself take one, just again, to bring my Land Raider in, but it's not something I go to as a default. My default is definitely going to be combat veterans. So I kind of consider this one a last resort, but without the same kind of like confused W2F feeling that I have towards special assignment. Now, as general rules, since we're going through these and just finished the prime advantages that come in the core rules, my general approach to list building when it comes to these things is I'm going to try to build my list without using logistical benefit at all. Try to fill out as many of those detachments as I can. And then if you have to do something to get a unit into a list, you can do logistical benefit. But for the most of them, I want to maximize how many of these slots I'm actually using. For me in particular, the Sons of Horus one has a detachment where it's 2 troop slots that are both prime, a heavy assault, and an elite. And I actually run my list with 2 of those detachments. I have 2 units of despoilers, 1 in each detachment. That takes the Master Sergeant, because you can only have 1 of those per detachment. And the other unit with them is a tactical squad that has combat veterans. The reason is you're missing out on so much. And as you're building your list and realizing if you find yourself using logistical benefit a lot, that might be an opportunity to look at your collection and be like, okay, well, with the detachments I know that I own or have access to, what ways can I pivot my collection or, kind of plan my next model purchases in a way that brings this list more into coherency for 3rd edition? And that's what I did. I was like looking at my list, I'm like, well, I need more rhinos. I need an anti-tank thing, so I started to look at ways to kind of build my list with an attachment in that direction, and it's coming together. Now, you also, in addition to those base, I think, 6 prime advantages that every Legion has access to, your Legion has their own specific one. And I'm going to rapid fire through these very, very quickly just for hot take purposes, because it's a lot of information. I would much rather do a video on each Legion in specific, but I wanted to throw some ideas out there to get you maybe at least hopefully seeing why prime advantages are important. If not for rules purposes in terms of like having a more effective unit, then at least for narrative purposes for having a more fun game. And as we go through the various legions, as I'm saying with the prime advantages, I want you to be thinking about the different units in your collection and how they interact with that, right? Do these prime advantages lend themselves to certain units or play styles? How can you maximize it? Is it worth ignoring completely? Some of them are. So we're going to rapid fire through this, Loyalists and then Traitors, because I did these in order. Let's start with the Dark Angels. Dark Angels, pick a Centurion or a Centurion with Jump Pack. They get +1 to their weapon skill, and they can take a Dark Angel specific Greatsword in exchange for a Bolter for free. They also gain a special rule from their army. Basically, you get to pick one of the knightly factions that the Dark Angels have, and they gain some special rules from that thing. My opinion is that in a faction that is all about knights, you pick a hero and you give them a suitable upgrade for free. I say lean in. This is a fantastic one to me. Plus, I believe those greatswords are actually quite good. I think it's the Tyrannic Greatsword, if I'm not mistaken. And that rule that he gets access to, the different knight house rules or whatever, the Hexagramma Abominata. I can never pronounce these things. There's actually a big suite of rules, so you can really customize and kit out your Centurion the way you want him to be. Next are the White Scars with the Magyar Mazan, that is theirs. You pick an infantry or cavalry unit and it gains Expendable 2. What this means is that your opponent can only earn a maximum of 2 victory points for destroying this unit, regardless of any other rules. Regardless of the mission rules, regardless of if the unit that killed them has Vanguard 10,000, doesn't matter, they're only getting 2. And this is an interesting choice for any unit that wants to be aggressive. If you have a unit that you know you are going to throw immediately in your opponent's face, whether it is to act as a roadblock or to do damage, and you just know that they're probably not going to last the whole game, or you know that they're going to go after an objective, those are great reasons to put Expendable on a unit. Because your opponent's going to be looking for slim, easy pickings, low-hanging fruit to get that vanguard. So you can throttle essentially what they want to do with their units, which is fantastic. And thematically, this is a really cool one because this represents the veterans who started to turn against Jakadi Khan, and then he basically shamed them. So that's why they're expendable. Then there are the Space Wolves, with probably one of the most specific ones yet. It's called the Pack Thane. You pick an Opti, which is the cheapest base level command thing you can pick for 50 points. You increase its base weapon skill by 1, so he's on par with a little bit more expensive heroes. And he can exchange his power sword for a few Space Wolf specific things. They have their own axes and stuff like that. This is supposed to represent a minor hero that's looking to start their own saga, which I say lean in, of course. I would bring one for 50 points. Why not? But I also, am not going to, design my whole play plan around him. There's the Imperial Fists. Theirs is called the Castellan, which is you pick a Centurion, he gets a free augury scanner, and must exchange his weapon for a free choice of a heavy bolter, autocannon, or Elastis assault cannon. This is a fantastic hero to plug into a heavy weapon squad because he already comes with his own auger scanner, so you don't have to buy that upgrade on the unit he's with. And if you put him with other things like, say, missile launcher teams or a last cannon crew, something like that, whenever something deep strikes, the whole team can then fire at this thing, and he's firing with a heavy weapon. I like it. He's like a support for, a heavy support team. Next up is the Blood Angels with their rule, the Revenants. The only restriction here is that they are in fact Blood Angels, and it gives them Fear 1. This is incredible. If I did not already have a Legion, I would be starting Blood Angels yesterday. Whether it's on a hero or not, or a unit rather, consider this for anything that is going to be within 12 inches of the enemy. All right, if you also bring weapons with status effects, even better. A flamer, a suppressive weapon, or just getting into melee, something that makes your opponent test against cool and leadership at a -1. You can do a lot of mean things with this, and I think it is fantastic. Next up is Iron Hands, and theirs is called the Ironclad. And this has got to be one of the more unique of them, and I actually like it quite a bit. See, it's a command slot prime advantage. It's once per army. And what this means is when you take it, you can add a war machine to the detachment that this unit's in. Now, war machine detachments are essentially dreadnoughts. Let's just put it another way. That dreadnought that you add to your list gains the champion type. So what does that mean? Character dreadnoughts. Their loadout options don't change, but they can enter into challenges, they can issue them, and I love this for modeling purposes alone. I know that on paper it's essentially logistical benefit, but for a dreadnought in particular, but making it a character makes this a very scary proposition, and frankly, fantastic for modeling purposes. I really can't get over this. I back in when I was a kid, really wanted to play, I think it was Space Wolves in 40k. They had the character dreadnought. Some of the Blood Angels ones did too, with they had a few psychers in dreadnought form, but I don't know. I love the idea of character dreads. Next up are the Ultramarines, and their rule is called Logistical. It is a prime advantage for command slots, and they allow you to add a transport or heavy transport to the detachment that they're in, and you increase that transport's capacity by 2. So this is another one where it's essentially logistical benefit plus. You get a free transport. I mean, I probably would not waste this on a Rhino, but you could. Makes perfect sense too. That slot could also be a Land Raider. Just throwing it out there. But instead of deploying 10-man squads in a Rhino, you could have your 10-man tactical squads or whatever squad you want, plus a captain and a medic. Essentially, the idea being that thematically, the Ultramarines are always prepared to dispatch and address things, and so they have their leadership on board right there ready to respond. It doesn't have the same on-table impact, I feel, in terms of just looking very dramatic, but it will affect things quite a bit if there is a hero in this situation that normally a player could only throw 10 tacticals at. Next up are the Salamanders, and their rule is called Duty Before Death. It can only be taken by Salamander troops, and it gives them a 6-up feel no pain. Frankly, no notes. 10 out of 10 would take every single day of the week if I could. Tied maybe with Blood Angels. I think I would lean towards them just because I like the idea of debuffing my opponent versus just being strong, but this is fantastic. Then there is the Raven Guard, and theirs are called Wraiths. That's their prime unit. Only goes on Raven Guard troops, and if this unit makes a rush move, you can choose to make a willpower check. If you pass it, anyone who charges you does so as disordered. If you fail, you're stunned. It fits with their army rule of being like hard to hit, moving around, racing so fast you're in a blur. It's supposed to be a way to kind of put yourself out there without absorbing too much fire on the inbound, kind of a thing. It's not my favorite rule, but if Raven Guard players, if you find a lot of use out of it, please let me know how you do. And that is it for the Loyalist. My favorite ones, as I've already pointed out, Blood Angels by Given Fear, and Salamanders with their 6-up Feel No Pain. The rest of them all have a little something to add. I think if I was going to pick one that just doesn't interest me the most, it is probably the Space Wolves one, only because it's tied to a hero choice that doesn't interest me. Like, I really like when it's like, pick a Centurion or something like that, because the Centurion is has a lot of utility on their own, and then you're just making that into a more unique character, whereas the Opti, he just doesn't bring anything on his own, so making him cool and unique, I feel like he has a longer way to walk to become interesting than a Centurion. How about that? And then jumping into the Traitor side of things. Emperor's Children. Their prime advantage is the Phoenix Warden. A Tartaros Centurion model can be chosen for this prime advantage. He gets a Phoenix Power Spear and gains the ability called Skill Unmatched, which the Phoenix Terminators also have. It makes it better at either hitting or defending in combat. You get to choose each turn. So basically you modify their weapon skill when you are attacking or defending, and that will make it harder for your opponent to hit you or easier for you to hit your opponent, which is very specific, but I do like the idea of him going with a unit of Terminators. Iron Warriors. Their prime advantage is the Unfavored. It can go on any infantry unit, and they gain Expendable 1. Now, we already talked about Expendable 2 on the White Scars, and this just makes it even better. The difference with the White Scar one is that it could go on cavalry, which is important because of how frail cavalry is. Here, it's only on infantry, but we're talking about the faction of meat shields. This is Iron Warriors. We see units, they see speed bumps, and so that makes this power fantastic. Then the Night Lords have the Atramentar, and this goes on a few different options. It can be a Centurion in Terminator armor, any kind of Terminator. It can go on Cataphracti Terminators, Command Squad, Tartaros Terminators, all that kind of stuff. Basically, it seems to be anything except for Saturnine. They get Deep Strike, so they can come into the board, and then Impact Initiative. So meaning when they charge, their initiative goes up by 1. Now, in terms of prime advantages setting up a unit for a killer role, these guys kind of win. I like this quite a bit. I love Impact as just a rule. They'll be able to drop down, get into combat, and swing first, hopefully to deliver a little bit more pain in that first round of combat. Then there are the World Eaters, and theirs is Chain Bonded, once per army. Pick a command slot, and now you pick another command slot, so you have 2 models chosen, and they are now both chain bonded. If those 2 models are in coherency, they both get +1 to hit. This tells me I want to, as much as I can, have at least 2 heroes in my list that are kitted out for melee combat, and that they are together going to be the forward drivers of your main push. Now, it doesn't increase their initiative or anything like that, so kind of think up carefully when you're kitting out how these heroes are going to attack, right? Maybe have one kitted out to where he can try to get a higher initiative, maybe give him the Power Spear or something like that so he can strike first, because he's going to get +1 no matter what, +1 to hit, so it's just a matter of when he hits. And the other one could be, you can kit him out to strike last, just plan on that, but give him like a Thunder Hammer or something real meat. So that way they can go double dragon, and whatever enemy comes across them, one of the 2 of them can deal with it. Next up are the Death Guard, and their prime advantage is Unnatural Resilience. Once per army, pick a Centurion or Cataphracti Centurion. Its base wounds, it goes up by 1, and it gains Eternal Warrior 2, which is a rule that decreases incoming damage by that amount. So it decreases by 2. Yes, absolutely. Your heroes, Nurgle stuff is tanky. It's tough. You want your heroes to stay alive. This is simply going to help you do that thing. Then the Thousand Suns have Telekine Shift, which I was so curious to see how they're going to represent this. It can only be taken by troops choices. And in this one, when you go to rush, meaning run, you do your extra initiative movement, you can choose to take a willpower test. If you succeed, you gain the anti-grav and move through cover rules, and if you fail, you can't move. Now, what this is trying to represent is something very specific. Prospero Burns is a great example of this because there are essentially Thousand Suns that look like they're teleporting all over the place, and the Space Wolves can't figure out how to fight them, and they're basically stepping backwards and kind of doing the Homer Simpson into the green bush, fading into the shadows and popping up elsewhere. They're doing a telekine shift. It's like a mini webway. And so the idea is you can have a unit up against a wall, go to rush. If you pass the willpower check, essentially phase through the wall, and allows you to get to the objectives way quicker, way smoother, probably taking advantage of some cover on the way in. It's very interesting. This is one of those ones that, like, the craftier the player, the more use it has. Then there are my boys, the Sons of Horus with Martial Supremacy. You pick an elite slot. One model in that unit gains Champion and Duelist's Edge once. Duelist Edge 1. Now, the reason this is important is because our elite slot choice, the Justaran Terminators, don't actually have a sergeant. So it has to be written in such a way as to pick a model in that unit, elevate it in some fashion, and that's where we get this. So it essentially is Master Sergeant, but for my elite Terminators. It is a good rule. I just haven't had to use it because normally when I bring my Justaran, I always plug a Centurion and Terminator armor with them, and that typically with Paragon of Battle does kind of the same thing. In terms of getting ready for challenges and that kind of stuff. Duelist Edge 1 is fantastic. It just is +1 to your focus when you're doing your challenges, which is great. But I just haven't felt that there's much use for it, probably because I don't take Justaran outside of having a leader with them. It could be interesting in the future. Next are the Word Bearers with Zealous Assault. They can only be applied to troop types for your prime advantages, and they gain Impact Strength. So what that means is when these basic troops charge into something, that first round of combat, they are at +1 strength. I used to have something like this as Sons of Horus in the last edition. Well, it would reduce my opponent's strength by 1, but on the curve it's kind of the same. I adore this rule and I'm kind of jealous. And lastly for the legions are the Alpha Legion. And they have probably one of the weirdest and most fun ones out there, to be very serious. It's called the Rewards of Treachery. You take this on a command slot, and you can add 1 slot to this detachment, so it functions similarly so far like logistical benefit, but whatever you choose cannot be Alpha Legion. And it also cannot be unique, like a named character, kind of unique. But that's your only rules. It has to be from a different legion. It gains Alpha Legion and loses whatever other stuff it has. And it cannot be a named thing. So if you're an Alpha Legion player and you like the Blood Angel specific Terminators, get them. This is the idea that they have infiltrated all the other legions and know all their good stuff so that they can bring it against them, or bring it against the Alpha Legion's enemies when they fight. So more so than any other legion, this is the one where you look at everybody else and go, what kind of cool stuff you got over there? Nice. I'll take one. Now this also might invalidate some of the rules on their data entries. So for example, if the Blood Angels Terminators have a thing that relates to another Blood Angels unit, you're not going to be able to use that rule or anything like that. So you have to think about it. But there are some pretty dang good units out in this game. Now that is it for the different legions. This has already gone on long quite a bit. As you can see, the legion ones vary wildly, where the core ones are about like, here's some stuff for units, here's a couple that are really good for heroes, here's a generic one that anyone can use, like the logistical benefit. And then you get into the legion ones and it's like, you are going to take an Opti, you are going to take a Contemptor Dreadnought. It's much more fined in, and the legions who have a lot of freedom, it feels that way. The legions who are just Blood Angels, take a unit, give them fear. There's so much freedom and utility in that versus take an Opti, give them a free Ice Axe. I don't know, it's wild. I think some of these things are balanced out by the other options the armies have. For example, Sons of Horus, I don't like my prime advantage. I never take it, as I mentioned before. I also don't care because I like a lot of the other stuff I have, which is generally what I've heard from Space Wolf players too. For me in particular, I've never been a big fan of special rules that you have to roll for. So like the Telekine Shift one for the Thousand Suns, I can absolutely see without question the utility in that. I have played games where it would have won me the game. I can see it and know that it's powerful. At the same time, when I'm list building and I have to choose a prime advantage that only goes off on a willpower check, it just means it might not work sometimes, which is a real bummer. It is by definition less consistent than just +1 to your leadership, or, you know, all the mental stats with combat veterans. So there's just kind of something to think about. It's going to matter on different units. You know, some units are going to need the mental stats buff more than others, that kind of thing. And so let's wrap this all up by, in conclusion, I hope you enjoyed my synopsis of the various prime advantages. And really what the core of the thing is, build the list as much as you can without using any of them, including logistical benefit. When the list is about done, go through and add what you think would make each unit better based on the role that it's trying to do on the table. Dudes who sit back and do nothing, get combat? Sorry, all the names are going through my head together. Combat veterans, so I don't have to worry about them. +1 to all their mental stats, fix and forget. If they're going to go into the jaws of the enemy, I might think a little bit different. If there's a type of unit that would benefit my list, might think about that differently. And even within these choices, when you're locked in, you're not always focused on what the unit's good at. An example is the Dreadnought one for Iron Hands, right? You can take a Dreadnought, but it's not telling you how to equip it. You could just give him a little axe and have him backhand a hero, but then he's kitted out to go tank hunting. So there's a lot of versatility in here, and I like that. A lot of the hero-based ones make a lot of sense with the legions they're trying to represent, which is wonderful. And some of the other ones really focus on how useless the troops are, like the Iron Warriors, and the White Scars not so much. There's kind of a whole lore bit there, but Expendable kind of conveys that same idea. So all in all, build your list, try to add these at the end, and then just try to make them memorable. I'd say if you are a legion that has one of the, pick a specific type of hero and kit that one out. At least model one. Why not? It's awesome. And if you don't know what to do, just do combat veterans or master sergeant. Anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts. Leave them in the comments down below. I know I rapid fired through a lot of the legion ones, but really it was just to talk about the benefits of the core ones and kind of put the legion ones in perspective, because when you list them all out together, it doesn't seem like the options don't seem as vast and kind of analysis paralysis inducing, because a lot of the legion ones are very much geared towards units, centurions, infantry, bike, whatever it might be. Whereas the basic ones, you can look at your list and just generally think about the unit, what it's going to be doing, and one of those will probably apply to it. So anyway, I hope this definitely helped your question. I don't know if I answered it, but you wanted me to talk about prime advantages, so I did. Thank you all so much for watching and listening, and I'll catch you in my next video. Happy wargaming, friends.